Hello, hello, Jordan Sheridan live, Status Coup. Hope everybody's having a lovely, what's today, Wednesday, 2023 in the United Corporations of America. Just want to say, I totally forget. Oh, Vicky made this, but I was cleaning up here in the studio and I found this that was made by a wonderful viewer a couple years ago. So next time Colin's up here, I'm going to try to figure out a way to get it back in the frame in the studio. So that's homemade, hand stitched Status Coup from Vicky, an original piece of Status Coup fabric art for you. It says on the back. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Big day here at Status Coup. This morning, I published an investigative story that I've been working on for a couple days now that I think clearly shows that East Palestine, Ohio, was sacrificed by a multi-billion-dollar railroad company, and the EPA has then helped that multi-billion-dollar railroad company cover the whole thing up as residents get sicker and sicker for months, and as the American corporate media and the quote-unquote journalists in this country move on from said nuking of a small town in Ohio. Even though I published a story this morning, it's hard to get other journalists to give a damn about this story anymore, even though if you read the story, and we're going to go through it, and some of the videos that we obtained through a recording, an EPA official was not aware that he was being recorded by some of the residents there and accidentally told the truth. Hate when that happens. So we published it on Substack. Colin put the Substack link in the description. So please read the Substack story. Share the Substack story. It's free. You don't have to pay to be part of our Substack. So definitely sign up for our Substack. That's statuscoup.substack.com. But if that wasn't enough, this major story, which we're going to go through at 5 o'clock Eastern, we'll have an interview with Dr. Cornel West, who has been around the last week or so after announcing, he announced he was running as an MPP candidate. Then he switched to he's running for the Green Party nomination. So I tried to kind of change it up, ask him different questions. We recorded yesterday. So that will air at 5 o'clock Eastern. It's about, I think, like 45 minutes. And he said quite interesting things, I would say, particularly about the differences between him and Bernie, had some words for RFK, did address or not address some things related to MPP. So I think it's a good interview. We'll air that during the normal live stream time at 5 o'clock Eastern. But first, let's get into this. And by the way, if you're on Twitter, please retweet the tweet with this story. That is super important, because as we always do at Status Coup, whether it goes viral or not, we don't just cover stories when the initial explosion happens. We continue covering it. Hell, I've been on Flint for 7-8 years. And now East Palestine, by the way, Lewis is out of the country. So, he's obviously done God's work on East Palestine. And we're talking about sending him there again this summer, which would be his 4th time. But right now he's out of the country on a much-deserved vacation. So that's why I'm kind of solo on this East Palestine story. So let's put up the story. We'll put the link in the super chat. Definitely appreciate any super chats today, any memberships. As far as I know, there's nobody doing any investigative reporting on East Palestine other than Status Coup. And we could definitely use your super chats and support and membership signups. We've kind of slowed down a little bit in terms of signups for memberships, so that would be great to get that going. That's statuscoup.com/join, statuscoup.com/join. So I'll be starting and stopping and giving you the main takeaways from this. Exclusive EPA official admits there's no evidence to support Norfolk Southern's detonation of 5 vinyl chloride cars in East Palestine. Railroad performed prohibited open burn. So before we get to the story, obviously, you remember that massive plume over East Palestine, which clearly went elsewhere. And smash that like button, share this live stream. The more people that press like, the more people that will share, the more people we can get this out to. We were told by Norfolk Southern and then the EPA that after the derailment of these train cars, which happened because of Norfolk Southern's and the railroad industry's deregulation, we were told that these cars, which included 5 cars of toxic vinyl chloride, we were told that these cars were close to an imminent, uncontrolled explosion, that they were going to explode over the town between the shrapnel from the trains, obviously the chemicals. It could threaten life, meaning residents could die. And we were told that because these cars were so hot and heating up so fast, the railroad had to, quote, do a controlled burn to basically take control and avoid the cars being blown up in an uncontrolled manner. Experts I've spoken with, Lewis spoke with, very much doubted that. Well, behind the scenes in a private conversation that I didn't know he was being recorded, an EPA official basically said, yeah, there's no evidence of that. So read along with me. We'll stop and start. Status Coup has obtained video in which an EPA official, unaware he was being recorded, acknowledged to several East Palestine residents that officials with the federal agency who were on the ground in East Palestine after the Norfolk Southern derailment in February saw no evidence to support the railroad company's decision to detonate 5 cars carrying toxic vinyl chloride. The EPA official also revealed that the process, this is very important, the process that resulted in a chemical explosion over the small village was a prohibited open burn detonation, contradicting both the EPA and Norfolk Southern's claims made since the derailment and detonation that the procedure was a, quote, controlled burn. EPA regulations prohibited the open burning and detonation of hazardous waste in 1980 due to the potential risks to human health and the environment. My quote, my question has always been, why 5 cars of vinyl chloride? Mark Durno, an EPA on-scene coordinator, told several East Palestine residents on June 6th, following a public information session featuring CDC and EPA officials. He also revealed that EPA officials saw no indication that, as Norfolk Southern claimed, 5 cars of toxic vinyl chloride were at risk of an imminent, uncontrolled explosion. Quote, the way I understand it from our guys that were on site is that 4 of them, meaning 4 of the cars carrying vinyl chloride, were not showing signs of stress yet. 1 was, and 1 was getting close. So why? And then we had 2 burn pits. So that tells me that, let's say 1 could influence 1 or 2 others. Then what about the other 2? Interestingly enough, I've been told, and smash that like button, share this live stream. I've been told that Mr. Durno is out for a few days. I was also told that at an event in East Palestine last night, he looked a little shooken. He looked a little shook because I reached out to the EPA yesterday about this story and requesting comment. They did not get back to me before I published it this morning. Not surprisingly, Norfolk Southern also did not get back. Let's play that first clip so you guys could see what he said in the video.
My question has always been why 5?
Yeah, why 5?
Because 4 of them were bent perfectly fine.
4 of them, the way I understand it from our guys who were on site, is that 4 of them were not showing signs of stress yet. 1 was, and 1 was getting close.
Was that one?
So
in
why?
the 4?
And then we had 2 burn pits, right? So
Right.
that tells me that, let's say 1 could influence 1 or 2 others. Then what about the other 2?
Have you guys stopped any Florida?
So those are some of the hold that thought.
Oh, okay.
So those are some of the questions that I think are going to come out as NTSB is coming here at the end of the month.
Yeah.
I think those will be
I
some
think that
questions.
there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out with them.
Yeah.
But
there's an investigative side of this that hasn't even
Right.
started yet. You know, I worked up in Flint for a year and a half, and that investigation is still going on.
And you could go ask the people of Flint what they think of Mr. Durno, Mark Durno, who I know quite a bit about. But we won't make this about Mark, who's just kind of a, company man for the EPA and toes their line, which is often lies. But I want to get into what he said there. When he's saying that our people on the ground saw no signs of stress for these other 4 cars. Remember, they detonated 5 cars of vinyl chloride, which is a very, very toxic, cancerous chemical. Sadly, unfortunately, you're probably going to see a lot of residents in this town have health problems. They already do, and cancer over the next few years. When he says we didn't see those 4 cars under stress, what he means by that is we didn't see those cars getting so hot in terms of temperature rising because of the fire that they were under stress or potentially on the verge of, an uncontrolled explosion. That's what he means by not under stress. But Norfolk Southern claimed first it was one of the cars was about to explode, so we need to detonate one of the cars. And then overnight, so between Sunday night, February 5th, and Monday morning, February 6th, it went from 1 car is about to explode to suddenly four other cars are about to explode, which didn't make a lot of sense. So why is it if the EPA officials that were on the ground, which an EPA official is saying in this private conversation, if they didn't see any evidence that 4 other cars were about to explode, why did the EPA allow Norfolk Southern, and let's stop with, it was the fire chief's decision to blow up these cars. Why would the EPA allow it? Why would the EPA not, fight Norfolk Southern on detonating these cars? Why would the federal agency allow a company to basically detonate a toxic, cancerous chemical shower over a small town, which with the wind is going to go in other directions, not just in East Palestine, to West Virginia, to Pennsylvania. Reports are people were smelling and seeing this plume in New York. There were even reports up in Canada. And why, if your people on the ground had no evidence of this, was the EPA this whole time going along with this narrative that there was no choice but to blow up these cars? That's called a lie. It's called a cover-up. And why would the residents of East Palestine trust the EPA who's on the ground telling them that, well, our testing is showing everything's coming up roses? Your air is fine. The soil is testing fine. The water is testing fine. We're not finding vinyl chloride. We're not finding other concerning chemicals. Well, if you're lying about this, what else are you lying about? And there's a whole lot of conspiracy theorists out there right now on a whole lot of other topics. There's a lot of, I think, crackpots and quacks in politics and on YouTube pushing a lot of bullshit. However, it's not a conspiracy if you catch them lying in the act. I don't know Durno. I don't know this EPA official. I don't know if he's a good person, a bad person. But what I do know is in private, he didn't know he was being recorded. So props to the East Palestine residents. Obviously, I won't get into sources who recorded him. But in private, he told the truth. But why would the EPA go along with this? Why would the EPA, if you're not seeing evidence that these cars are under stress and are about to explode, why wouldn't you demand that the company, instead of blowing up the cars, take more time to safely extract the chemicals out of the car? Would that have kept the tracks closed longer? Would that have cost Norfolk Southern more money? Because every hour, every day that those trains aren't running, you're talking millions of dollars. I love also how he says, we haven't even gotten into the investigative period yet. Well, what have you been doing? Oh, he says, we're still in the cleanup period. Well, I could tell you, and Lewis could tell you from the residents we talked to, that cleanup, not working so much. Residents, as we detail in the story, are sick and getting sicker. nausea, dizziness, burning eyes, sore throat, numbness in the lips and tongue, sinus problems. To be frank, women are having delayed periods in East Palestine. You have people that I have talked to residents that there is blood coming out of their rectums. This is serious shit, folks. Let's continue. He also revealed that EPA officials saw no I just read that. Durno's reference to there being 2 burn pits and doubting whether 1 or 2 vinyl chloride cars vulnerable to an uncontrolled explosion could threaten the other vinyl chloride cars is particularly noteworthy considering, according to Norfolk Southern's manifest, 4 of the vinyl chloride cars were grouped together with a 5th vinyl chloride car 24 cars behind them. That's important, folks. Not even getting into that it's a little weird and suspicious that you have 4, because all these chemicals are supposed to be in a block together on these trains. So you have 4 of the vinyl chlorides between cars 26 and 29, and then a stray 5th vinyl chloride car 24 cars back. That was odd, and Lewis and I have looked into that before. But if they're saying all of these cars, if one exploded, that explosion could have triggered these other cars to explode. Well, how is at least this one car that's 24 cars back of the other 4 vinyl chloride cars make sense? If basic physics, maybe if it's a few cars back, you could have some effect, but not 24 cars back. So we at least know one of the cars was not close enough to be affected by the other 4. Doesn't make sense. Exposure to vinyl chloride is linked to increased risks of a rare form of liver cancer, along with primary liver cancer, brain and lung cancers, lymphoma, and leukemia, according to the National Cancer Institute. Sil Casiano, a hazardous waste specialist who spent 39 years in the Youngstown, Ohio Fire Department, said Durno's private admission reinforces his belief that there was no emergency situation that required any of the 5 vinyl chloride cars to be detonated over East Palestine. Quote, I seriously question if any were under serious stress given the fact that they were all blown up, he told us. He emphasized that if the 5 vinyl chloride cars were heating up to the point that they were all at risk of an uncontrolled explosion, it would not be possible for first responders and emergency crews to safely work anywhere near them. Quote, how do you work on a fire-impinged tanker that's hot enough for a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion? Shorthand, they call that a BLEVE. It was not too hot for emergency crews to get near the container and place the explosive on it without incident. So exactly how hot was it? A thermal image camera should have been used to document the temperatures. Was it? Where's the documentation? Most thermal image cameras have internal recording or telemetry. This speaks directly to my belief that they did this to get the train lines open. I still believe this was about getting rid of product and not about the dangers. I concur. And I think this evidence shows, particularly with the EPA official saying, yeah, our guys saw no evidence that these 4 other cars were about to detonate. Sil, who was in the fire department for almost 40 years, he's saying he doesn't think even one was close to detonating. And by the way, there was never any proof provided by Norfolk Southern or the EPA that any of them were hot enough about to explode. Tomorrow, it just so happens, luckily we were able to publish this right before, but tomorrow starts the first investigative hearing by the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. It'll be a 2-day hearing in East Palestine. Again, Lewis is out of the country. We'll cover it. We won't be there, but we'll cover it. I sent this to the NTSB. I don't know what investigation they've done so far, but they better damn well have some of these details, or I'm not going to put a lot of stock in their investigation. I want to play clips. Colin, I sent this to you right before we went live. Sil, who just basically told us, just from a basic common sense perspective, how do you have the emergency crews go in and put the sparks down that are going to explode the cars if the cars are so hot they're about to explode? Does that make any sense? How would they be able to get so close to burning cars that are so hot they're about to explode unless these emergency crews have a fucking death wish? Doesn't really make sense from a basic fire, temperature, physics, chemistry perspective. But I want to play previous clips on Sil basically saying, well, let's just play the 2 clips.
Vinyl chloride is what you use to make PVC pipe. You know, your plumbing pipe is you use it to make the casings that go on the outside of electrical wires. Has a wide variety of usages.
Sil Caggiano has spent close to 4 decades working as a hazardous materials specialist and tells me being exposed to vinyl chloride can be extremely dangerous, and so are the byproduct chemicals it gives off if it were to burn.
Vinyl chloride in and of itself is cancerous. Some of the other stuff is just as bad. The hydrogen chloride is bad enough that when you inhale it, it mixes with the water in your lungs and you could have acid burns in your lungs.
He says anyone with pre-existing lung or breathing problems is more at risk.
If you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, stay in. Keep your evacuation distances, stay in, don't go outside, because this stuff will affect you a lot quicker.
Caggiano suggests if the vinyl chloride does catch fire, to get farther away from the site of the train if you can, and stay sheltered inside away from the chemicals.
They could kill you because of the damage they could do to your respiratory system, because most of the damage with this is going to be inhalatory. So, this is some bad stuff.
So that was one clip. I want to play this other clip, which I think kind of just very accurately and honestly depicts what happened here.
We basically nuked a town with chemicals so we could get a railroad open.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency sent a letter to Norfolk Southern stating that ethylene glycol monobutyl ether, ethylhexyl-acrylate, and isobutylene were also in the rail cars that were derailed, breached, or on fire. Caggiano says ethylhexyl-acrylate is especially worrisome. He says it's a carcinogen, and contact with it can cause burning and irritation in the skin and eyes. Breathing it in can irritate the nose, throat, and cause coughing and shortness of breath. Isobutylene is also known to cause dizziness and drowsiness when inhaled.
I was kind of surprised that when they quickly told the people they can go back home, but then said if they feel like they want their homes tested, they can have them tested. I would have far rather they did all the testing.
Caggiano says it's possible some of these chemicals could still be present in homes and on objects until you clean them thoroughly.
So there's a lot of what ifs, and we're going to be looking at this thing 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line and wondering, gee, cancer clusters could pop up, well water could go bad.
What he's talking about is because of the vinyl chloride, which is not just vinyl chloride, as we'll go through later in the story. There's a whole lot of other chemical byproducts that come from the combustion of vinyl chloride. So you have a petri dish and a chemical shower over this small village, and then you have the EPA and the CDC saying, everything's fine, folks. Don't worry that your eyes are burning months later. Don't worry that you got rashes on your body. That, by the way, are coming from showering in city water in most cases, the city water that they have declared safe. Don't worry about any of it. A lot of this stuff is from stress, not the chemicals. This is what residents are being told. Residents are also being bounced around when they call the EPA. The EPA is saying you got to call Norfolk Southern. When they call Norfolk Southern, they're getting the go around. Residents are not getting offered, the residents that do want to relocate because of health problems or their house still smells like a fucking gas station. They're not getting offered relocation paid by Norfolk Southern. They're still getting, some of them, temporary relocation at a hotel. Well, how long could you temporarily relocate your kids, your dogs, whatever the case may be, at a hotel? Kids have been pulled out of school in some cases. If this happened in a wealthy town, I'm pretty sure anyone that would want to move, it would be paid for. Well, it wouldn't happen in a wealthy town, let's be honest. So let's keep reading here. Jack Van Kirk, who spent 14 years as a firefighter with the Chippewa, Pennsylvania Fire Department, echoed Casiano's suspicion. Quote, the only reason I could come up with to detonate 5 vinyl chloride cars would be for them to speed up the cleanup around the tracks, because obviously if you burn off the chemicals, then there's less cleanup on the ground. Sounds to me like they were higher powers involved calling the shots that the EPA won't admit to. And when they talk about speeding up the cleanup, and I've had Jack on, he's a firefighter or former firefighter. We know that they tried to speed up the cleanup or cover up the contamination, because Norfolk Southern literally buried contaminated soil under the tracks before they reopened the train. I mean, you can't make this up. The railroad company who detonated 5 cars of highly cancerous chemicals that we're now finding out they likely did not need to detonate, then buried contaminated soil under the tracks, and we're actually wondering if this was all a cover-up? I don't think so. And by the way, when in the United Corporations of America are we going to change laws so we could criminally go after these companies and criminally go after any government agencies that are complicit with the companies? We don't want to fine for Norfolk Southern, as you're going to hear the EPA official tell Norfolk Southern residents. We don't want to fine. Oh, we could fine them. No. If you take actions for profit that endanger the lives of Americans or anyone, that's not a civil violation. That is a crime against humanity. No word yet. EPA haven't gotten back to me. Norfolk Southern will not respond. They'll respond if it was like the New York Times, but they're hoping a little whatever, Status Coup, this blog, who cares? By the way, I emailed this story to environmental reporters at the New York Times, at the Cleveland Dealer, which I think is their big newspaper, Chicago Tribune, Washington Post. I've emailed a couple environmental reporters and editors. We'll see if they cover it. We got the videotape. I don't know why they wouldn't cover it unless they just don't give a fuck, which generally is the case. In my experience, I give you Flint, Michigan. Most of these reporters seem not to care if it's months or years later. So, Durno also acknowledged Norfolk Southern's detonation was, contrary to the company and the EPA's claims, a prohibited open burn. Let's play that clip, Colin.
So, you know how last week I brought up the thing about that being an open burn? And you said that it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could, yeah. So what I said was, yes, you can consider that an open burn.
Okay.
Right? But in an emergency situation, it is what it is.
Then I printed this out from, I don't know where it's from, but it had said, like, you can't do open burns at like sunset, or they have to be out by sunset.
Okay.
So like that happened about an hour before sunset. Well, that's when it got dark at my house.
That's right. No, it did. It happened. It was still burning at sunset. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
And then when there's a temperature inversion, does that mean that kind of inversion that happened?
So interesting thing about the inversion. So first of all, you're right. You know, all the open burn regulations would apply, but in an emergency situation,
Okay.
you know, there are a lot of things that we do. We're actually exempt. If we were doing that work, we're actually exempt from those types of regulations because it's an emergency. Right?
Okay.
Now, the company's not necessarily. So there could be significant fines and penalties levied based on their actions.
Was it the?
There could be.
Was it the one of the branches of like National Guard? I think is who did the actual detonation.
No, they did the modeling. The detonation was a company that I think they're out of Texas.
Okay.
They're the experts on controlled releases.
Yeah,
like that.
because I had heard that there was a guy that was like 19 years old who did part of that detonation, and I thought, well, what kind of experience does a 19-year-old kid have?
Yeah.
Except for blowing up toys in his backyard.
And I don't know the
Really
answer to that. The company is brought in. Again, I believe they're from Texas because I've been on a couple of these types of sites before where we brought in that expertise and done that type of work. Not 5 cars, but have done that type of work. And yeah, they just that's their expertise. So I don't know who the actual people were because I wasn't here that night.
And then it says a fire shall be extinguished if at any time it creates a pollution problem, threat to public health, nuisance, or fire hazard. No burning shall be conducted during unfavorable, which goes back to the conditions.
Let's address the inversion question you had.
Yeah.
So there was an inversion happening at 3,000 feet.
Right.
When we finally get you that plume model, with again, 2 more data points. That's all I need to finally get that thing out to you guys.
Hold on, Eddie.
You'll see in the explanation that there was a 3,000-foot inversion going on, right? And that's why it pancaked. You saw it go up and it pancaked.
And I've heard that they wanted to do it at 12:30 and not at 4:30.
They did.
Because then it got like at 12 o'clock, I was getting ready to take him to school.
And from what I
then they
heard,
evacuated his school.
From what I heard, that the reason they had to wait till 4 o'clock is because they weren't assured that enough people had evacuated.
Whoa. So, a couple things there. When he says, yeah, you could consider it an open burn, but, we're not, the EPA doesn't have to follow those regulations in a case of an emergency, but the company does. Well, why would the company be exempt, but the EPA is not exempt from following its own regulations? And people's kind of eyes glaze over when you talk about EPA regulations, but like this is a regulation from 1980. Colin, if you have the regulation sheet, this was updated in 2022. The key points in 1980, the EPA prohibited open burn, open detonation of hazardous waste due to the potential risks to human health and the environment. EPA allowed one exception that would allow it to treat waste explosives that had no safe mode of treatment, meaning there were no other alternatives. You couldn't treat the explosive, you couldn't treat the waste any other way. In 2019, EPA and National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine published separate reports that document safe alternatives are available for managing many waste explosives. This memorandum responds to questions on how to apply the existing requirements. Under the existing requirements, open burn facilities must evaluate and reevaluate whether safe alternative technologies are available to treat their waste explosives. Where safe alternatives are available, facilities must use those alternatives instead of an open burn. As I'll show you in a little bit, there's no indications that Norfolk Southern looked into any other option than blowing up these cars and getting those tracks open. But it's just very interesting to me that this EPA official that talks kind of very casually about, in an emergency, we could just blow it up, even though our own regulations say just blowing it up is dangerous to human health, particularly right over a small town. And also interesting, he's saying that, again, tell the truth in private, when the EPA was going along with this nonsensical fakakta narrative that Norfolk Southern put out of it was a controlled burn. So basically the EPA has been lying for almost 5 months that this was a controlled anything. This was an open burn detonation against their own regulations. If this, by the way, if this happened under Trump's EPA, oh my God, the resistance would be aghast. They would be crazy. Pretty much quiet right now from most of the MSNBC, vote blue no matter who, Trump derangement crowd. They don't seem to care when a Democrat is president. And by the way, the EPA has been shit under Democrats, Republicans. It's underfunded and frankly exists, I think, to protect business, not to protect the environment. But there you go. He's admitting this was an open burn, which in English just means a wildly reckless detonation of cancerous chemicals over this town. And I think we need to broaden it out. This is not just East Palestine. People in Pennsylvania are sick. I've spoken with people in West Virginia who have been sick since this. There's people to the west and the north in Ohio that have had health problems since this. Not to mention the environment and other things that's been affected. The dead animals. Spoken with folks who lost their foxes. Deer have died. There's a lot more than just the residents of East Palestine. And let me just see something here. And by the way, if you support this reporting, please sign up as a Status Coup member. This investigative reporting, it happens because we've been able to go on the ground to East Palestine as many times as we have. When you're able to go on the ground to East Palestine, to Flint, elsewhere, you build up sources. And through building up sources, you're able to get information that others cannot. By the way, sources in East Palestine, how we got this video, they gave it to us rather than the New York Times. Let me repeat that. The New York Times wanted this. They gave it to us instead because of our consistent reporting and tenacity on this story. So your support matters. Please sign up, statuscoup.com/join. So Durno's admission made in the video obtained by Status Coup comes a day before the National Transportation Safety Board begins a 2-day investigative hearing on the Norfolk Southern derailment in East Palestine. EPA regulations dating back 4 decades prohibited open burning and detonation of hazardous waste due to risks it posed to the environment and nearby people. The agency carved out one exception. I just told you about that, so I'll go forward. A former EPA official who requested anonymity since their current job engages with the agency told Status Coup that Durno's admission is important because it marks the first time the EPA has been honest about what happened in East Palestine after, quote, misleading and lying to the public for the past 5 months. Quote, these different descriptors of the burn have very important legal distinctions, the former EPA official said, stressing that the open burning of chemicals is, quote, very dangerous practice. Durno, a veteran EPA official who was involved in the agency's flawed Flint water crisis response, might have grown tired of being the face of EPA's, quote, false cover story, the former EPA official speculated. Stephen Lester, a toxicologist whose insistence that the EPA tests for dioxins following the derailment helped force the agency's hand to do so, he responded to us about Durno's admission. Quote, it's outrageous that EPA took so little control over the decision to deliberately burn vinyl chloride and other toxic chemicals in the derailed tanker cars in East Palestine. The agency should have taken control of the conversation with Norfolk Southern and emergency responders in the lead up to the decision to burn the vinyl chloride cars. Ultimately, he said, the EPA should have stopped it before the cars were detonated. Quote, EPA's decision to allow this deliberate burn is clearly irresponsible and a direct dereliction of duty. In response to Durno's admission that the EPA saw no indication that 4 additional vinyl chloride cars were at risk of an imminent uncontrolled explosion, toxicologist and NYU professor Judith Zelikoff stressed that the release of the chemicals from the additional 4 vinyl chloride cars resulted in a much graver threat to residents' health. Quote, the dose makes the poison. If you had exploded 5 cars, you would have had 5 times the amount being released. And it's not just the vinyl chloride. There are many, many other volatile organic compounds in the area, in the explosion emissions. Anything that you would have gotten from one, you would have gotten all those same byproducts, metabolic products once they get into the body, high risk, high concentration, possibility of further spread. Put yourself in a situation. Would you rather have 1 day of the Canadian wildfire pollution or 5? It's the frequency, it's the duration, it's the concentration. So there's no doubt in my mind that 1 car would release much less toxicants than if you blew up 5. Despite the EPA regulations that prohibit open burn detonations, Durno told residents that if the federal agency was in charge of the emergency response, it would be exempt from following its own open burn regulations. All the open burn regulations would apply, but in an emergency situation, we're actually exempt. And I already played that clip for you. Oh, I might have put the clips out of place. I'll have to fix that. Let's play this next clip, Colin.
Since in 1980, about you guys set it out to where this was outlawed.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
The controlled burn,
A vent and burn is outlawed by the EPA in 1984.
Now, are you talking about open burning, or
No, vent and burns.
Well, again, in emergency situations, if we were doing the work,
But they said the
said-
EPA didn't have a play.
It said that a
again,
vent and burn,
if we were doing the work,
if
we
you
would
go
be-
through every
we would
scenario,
be-
and that's the only choice.
we would be exempt from that rule if we were doing the work. We weren't doing the work, but we were present on site.
But would that
Right.
apply to, like,
That-
your
so that-
law would
again,
apply to anybody else?
So what we're getting at is reconstructing the event, right, or deconstructing the event. The question is, what will happen next, right? And again, there's going to be an enforcement period that comes after the cleanup period. Right now, we're focused on cleanup, but then there's an enforcement
Wait.
piece of this where we have a lot of opportunities to use our enforcement authority based on their actions that were taken, right? Hey, good to see you again. Based on the actions that were taken. For example, they didn't call the National Response Center immediately like they're required to, right? So, from an enforcement standpoint, when we get into that phase, we can levy pretty significant fines and penalties against the railroad because of that. Similar with other environmental rules, but again, they could fight us on that because it was an emergency situation. So, what I guess what I'm telling you is this idea of the open burn, I don't think it's going to go that far.
Just what sick residents who have been displaced and are facing potential cancer want to hear. Don't worry, we'll find a multi-billion-dollar company. Why have a government, right? Why even have a government? It's just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And it stinks. And it's not just East Palestine. It's Flint, Kalamazoo. I mean, name your contaminated or poisoned by government or corporate America or both city. It's just terrible. Durno's admission to residents aligns with doubts Pennsylvania officials expressed soon after the derailment. On February 23rd, Randy Padfield, the director of Pennsylvania's FEMA, testified in front of Pennsylvania's Senate committee about what he perceived to be red flags when Norfolk Southern abruptly went from, on Sunday night, planning to burn one vinyl chloride car to, on Monday morning, pivoting to detonating an additional 4 vinyl chloride cars. Let's play that clip. Hold on. I think Colin's getting it.
What was it again?
It's right under the quote, the video.
Oh, it's that. Give me just a minute.
And smash that like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Again, we have an interview with Cornell West coming up at 5 o'clock Eastern. So big day here. Go ahead.
And this is a very unique situation because we went from the talking about venting and burning one car that probably had about 50% contents in it to venting and burning all 5 cars within a very short period of time, in a very time compressed and a very, I should say, non-discretionary time environment where we were forced into that kind of backed into that tactic, I should say. And I'm not saying that is not the tactic of choice, but they were not able to articulate any other courses of action that were thought through at that point in time. And we were trying to understand like what changed overnight that was driving that tactic that morning when they were briefing Governor DeWine.
Huh. So Norfolk Southern could not articulate to us, the authorities in Pennsylvania, if they looked into any safer alternatives. Norfolk Southern, what changed from Sunday night when you told us one car is going to explode to Monday morning, these other 4 cars are going to explode? Oh, Norfolk Southern wants to do it at noon while kids are in school. We had to say, no, you're not going to detonate these cars while kids are in school. We don't know if enough people are evacuated out of the town. Norfolk Southern didn't give a shit. Hey, we'll blow up the kids. We'll blow up the grannies. We'll blow up the whole town. We got to get these train lines moving, folks. Thank you for the super chat, Caitlin. Corporations are cancer to our society. They are growing out of control and sucking all the resources for themselves. They will grow until you die or treat them. Yeah, I think this is what happens when you have a government purchased by the highest bidder, when you basically have puppet government representatives who have been purchased. You could basically buy a politician for anywhere from minimum $10,000 if you're a donor. And corporations are allowed to do whatever they want. And the government will punish them with a fine if they give you cancer, give your kids cancer, blow up your town. We would say this is insanity if it was happening in a third world country. It's happening right here in the wealthiest country on earth. And I don't think we're voting our way out of this, folks. I don't think we're voting our way out of this. And by the way, this doesn't get added into the death count. God knows how many people have actually died from the Flint water crisis. Who knows how many people are actually going to die related to this cover-up? But you're not going to get a firm number because the media is going to move on, as they already have. Like Flint, story after story we break on these things, which if we were the New York Times, you would think other people would cover it, get ignored because the media doesn't care. The media is mostly made up of wealthy, elite, out-of-touch cosmopolitans who live in New York, D.C., borderline L.A. Their towns aren't getting blown up if you're a journalist or anchor. The railroad, they don't got railroads in their backyards. Their water's, for the most part, not getting poisoned. They're making money. To them, the biggest danger is Trump, not poisonous air, water, and soil. So these aren't the sexy stories. They don't think this will click. And we got the people that do pay attention to their news and politics. A lot of them are on Twitter, Facebook, and they think to them the biggest story is whatever insanity Elon Musk is pushing on Twitter or elsewhere. It's outrageous. So you got the EPA official privately admitting, there was no evidence to blow up these cars. You got the Pennsylvania head of Pennsylvania's version of FEMA very diplomatically at a public hearing saying, we basically questioned Norfolk Southern on why are you blowing up these 4 cars? And they couldn't give us an answer. Norfolk Southern won't respond to me. EPA hasn't responded to me on all these contradictions and basically lies that they've told for months. Screaming into the void for decades, Jenna says. Yeah. And by the way, why this is important, this could happen to any of us. Your water could be contaminated today. A train could blow up today. A tanker could explode in your community today. There's so many calamities going around that happen all the time. Plants going on fire. There was a plastic plant in Indiana that exploded with a fire. So it's not just East Palestine. It's not Flint. Anybody. It's like the mass shootings. It could happen anywhere because we don't really have real regulations in this country against corporate America. And because of the Supreme Court and government, the minuscule regulations we have are being peeled back at a very, very quick pace. And I can tell you, I mean, I got a 7-month-old daughter now. It's scary. It's scary that these kind of things could happen anywhere. At the same February hearing, Eric Brewer, the director of the emergency management for Beaver County, Pennsylvania, described the decision to increase the number of cars being detonated from 1 to 5 car in less than 24 hours as jaw-dropping. You basically have all these government bureaucrats who know that this is a crime against humanity, know that this railroad company had no legitimate reason to blow up these highly cancerous chemicals, and they're basically, to protect their jobs, their agencies, whatever, going before these hearings and kind of trying to say that this company is lying and this company just did this to open up the tracks and not lose money, but they won't just come out and say it. None of them are calling for criminal prosecution. None of them are calling for the government to evacuate this town, which should still be evacuated. None of them are calling for Medicaid or Medicare for these residents because they're going to have a lifetime of health problems. They're all just acting like, this is an unfortunate incident. Oh, Norfolk Southern, they couldn't really articulate to us why they blew up these cars. You know they shouldn't have blown up these cars. The railroad company, this part really makes me want to explode. Norfolk Southern recently requested that a U.S. judge toss a proposed class action lawsuit against it over East Palestine, claiming that it's prohibited by federal law. So apparently they should not be sued by the residents because of some federal law that allows companies to poison you with no liability. Meanwhile, the company continues to pay for fairs and other events in East Palestine, which is basically just PR to buy off the town and make it look like they're making the town hall, but they're refusing to pay for permanent relocation of residents who want to move or their health care expenses related to illnesses born from the chemicals they've been exposed to. As Status Coup has reported, East Palestine residents have experienced a disturbing amount of physical and cognitive health issues since the derailment and detonation. Dizziness, nausea, bloody noses, headaches, sore throat, chest pains, burning eyes, nose burning, numb lips and tongue, diarrhea, fatigue, rashes, sinus infections, numbness in the back of the neck, chloroacne, chemical taste in mouth, irregular menstrual cycles in women, forgetfulness, confusion, and increased anxiety. This is all symptoms that have been relayed to us by residents. The EPA did not respond to Status Coup's request for comment or questions for the publication of this story. In May, the agency cited legal reasons for not answering our question on whether the East Palestine detonation was, contrary to months of the agency's control burn claims, actually an open burn. Quote, "We aren't currently in the position to provide a legal conclusion responsive to your inquiry," a spokesperson told us there, i.e., we don't want to get sued by telling the truth. At the same time, a source familiar with the agency's evasive answer to us said, everyone is lawyering up. Since a significant volume of media coverage and reporting in February, soon after the derailment, media and public attention to the public health and humanitarian disaster in East Palestine has subsided. Status Coup reporter Louis DeAngelis has reported on the ground in East Palestine 3 times since the derailment, with a 4th trip planned for July, but the majority of national news outlets have moved on from the story. Speaking of that 4th trip, we need to keep growing our membership, folks. Obviously, right now, we don't have a ton of viewers. We're live a couple earlier than we normally are. But if you're not yet a Status Coup member, please, 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 we're not asking you to sign up for $5 to $10 a month for our health or to, become billionaires. That ain't going to happen. Your $5 to $10 a month helps fund our investigative reporting and our on-the-ground reporting to places like East Palestine. We're sending Tina back to Atlanta to cover a week of actions against Cop City. She'll be going there next week. We want to send Lewis back to East Palestine in July. So next month, which we're almost at July. I currently, if we could grow our funding and grow our membership, because right now we just had a very big expense buying a brand new live view, which costs us over $15,000, which is going to help us go live from more places. We got to tighten our belt a little bit unless we get more signups. And after a great month of May, we had like over 130 paid signups. Things have definitely slowed down in June. So if you are not yet a Status Coup member, please sign up. StatusCoup.com/join. $5 a month equals 16 cents a day. $10 a month equals 33 cents a day. I know there's a whole lot of places asking you to sign up, Patreon, this and that. God bless them. We're actually out there. We don't just sit in the studio. We actually go out in the field rather than just sit in our studio pontificating. So please sign up, StatusCoup.com. If you sign up while I'm live, I'll definitely give you a shout out. Let's wrap up the story here. A month ago, East Palestine residents presented a list of their demands, including that Governor DeWine declare a state of emergency, relocation for residents who want it, paid by Norfolk Southern, continual independent testing for contaminants over the next 30 years, and continual medical testing and care. That's another insane thing. The governor of this state, a Republican, it is almost 5 months since this happened. He has not declared a state of emergency, which if he declared a state of emergency, they would be getting more resources from the federal government. He has continually been submitting extensions to declare an emergency. What? How much time do you need? When he was in East Palestine, Lewis challenged him. He went around on one block talking to residents and handed out his wife's cookbook to poisoned residents. And this is, by the way, one of the Republicans considered to be like somewhat normal and reasonable, Mike DeWine. I mean, you can't make this shit up. So I'm going to continue pushing this story around, folks. We got EPA official admitting, yeah, they didn't need to blow up these cars. We have firefighters and first responders on the record saying, doesn't make sense. If the cars were so hot and heating up to the point that they were about to explode, you would not be able to send in the very people to set the explosions to do a controlled burn. Like, you're going to go in front of a burning stove, and carefully place explosives? And I got to tell you, I'm human. It's really frustrating. Story after story. We break story after story of environmental calamity, environmental cover-up, and we cannot get the mainstream media to pick it up. What does it take? Do we need to, I'm not saying we will, but will the New York Times care if like this happens in their backyard? I mean, right here, we have an EPA official video of him admitting that this railroad company nuked the town and there was no evidence that they needed to. In what world is that not front page news, folks? And, some people have said, well, Jordan, why don't you give this whole thing up and try to go work for the New York Times or a corporate outlet? So at least, you could break these stories for them and it would go further. Because they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't actually empower me to do these stories the way they need to be done. By the way, I told the source who gave me this information, if I think I've identified Jordan's gastrointestinal issue. Maybe. I told the source, I'm not going to tell you not to give this to the New York Times. If you want to give it to the New York Times rather than us, I'm not going to be mad. But I can promise you the New York Times write-up on this will be severely watered down. It will not tell the truth because that's what they do. They do both sides. They bend over backwards to be fair to the corporation or the government. And you basically get like a watered down vanilla story rather than the truth. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, we're going to continue covering this. I think this is part of the story. The other part is what actually happened after the derailment before this detonation. Why was Norfolk Southern in charge for hours after the fire started? That was on Friday night, February 3rd. Why was Norfolk Southern sending first responders, firefighters, away from the fire 3 hours after it started, when first responders told us the fire at that point was contained? Not that it was out, but it was contained. They had stopped it from getting worse. Well, I was told by first responders that's when you put your foot on the gas, no pun intended, and you throw more resources at the fire once you've contained it. But Norfolk Southern sent them away. Well, why would you do that? Who was really in charge that night? These things might seem in the weeds. It's not a sexy story, but it matters. It matters when corporate America and the government poison Americans and then sweep it under the rug, or in this case, bury the contaminated soil, and then just go on their way and then tell the residents, no, your water's fine. Your air is fine. Your water is fine. The soil's fine. Oh, by the way, then the EPA official admits, the equipment we're using, which Lewis broke months ago, the equipment we're using can't even detect lower levels. It could only detect super high levels. So there might be lower levels in homes, in the environment, that they can't detect. And the biggest story in America is what? I mean, okay, yeah, we care about, should care about Trump and his crimes. We've covered it. We should care about, the election and stuff and the campaign. We cover that here and there. Are we not capable as journalists to walk and chew gum at the same time? Why is this company, somebody just said, revoke their charter. Why is this company allowed to operate? Given that we now have the EPA on the record saying they criminally detonated cars that didn't need to be detonated. Right, the submarine's missing. I haven't been covering that. It sucks. I'm sorry to hear that the submarine is missing. It's good cable news TV. But, can't we cover multiple things? And that's the sickness. That's why we created Status Coup. That is the sickness with the media itself that has been purchased by corporations. The actual structure of the media, the incentives, is not to stay on important stories. It's to check the box when it first happens, cover it initially for, if you're lucky, a couple days, if not a week, and then move on. And the devil's advocate will say, well, Jordan, they can't cover everything. And, they don't have the resources. Let me tell you something. The New York Times has quadruple, 5 times, 6 times, 100 times the resources that we have. They could stay on this story and they could be breaking a lot of stories. And if they were, I'd be crediting them. Same with the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, Daily Beast, BuzzFeed, you name it. Associated Press, they all got more resources than we do. We are a small independent outlet. We've been around for 5 years. We take zero corporate dollars. We had one investor in the beginning. I was always open about that. It was for basically nothing, $50,000. Once we got the money was out the door the next day, buying equipment. At that time, bringing Ty on. So we didn't really have a massive investor. And for those of you who were with us from the beginning, after that, it was GoFundMe and building up small dollar membership, which let me see. Have we gotten any signups? Hint, hint. StatusCoup.com/join. Sign up for $5 to $10 a month. It makes a big, big, big difference. But yeah, it's disheartening when you work hard to break these stories and the media kind of drowns it out. But we're going to keep trucking along, and hopefully at some point we get a break and these stories kind of catch fire. I hope independent media will cover this. I know a lot of independent media outlets spend a lot more time on, food fights with one another and more hot takes and reactionary stuff. But I think this is important. Welcome new Status Coup member. Johnny just signed up. So we did get a new member since I've been live. So that's exciting. Colin, do we have those sketches to show people in the spirit of poisoning, poisoned America? Because I said to Colin, I want to create a new clothing line for Status Coup on the theme of the poisoned states of America. Do we have something we can show people?
Yeah, I got our sort of first draft preview here of 3 different designs going along the sort of poison states of America, or as you can see there in the middle, we got our poison states of America. We got water, which will have names of different poison water places we visited, and then what's in your water with the very familiar rainbows that people have seen in East Palestine and stuff. There'll be more adjustments as we go through here, but
all right, because I can't read the first shirt. Is that Flint and East Palestine?
Yeah, well, I backed it up so we could see all 3 in one image, but we'll get close-up shots later.
So we'll have that up on our store soon. That also is revenue for us. We're not trying to make light of poisoned people, but I think we need to start wearing and start getting more awareness out there that we live in the poisoned states of America, i.e. the United Corporations of America. By the way, you should be going to statuscoup.com/store anyway. Today, technically, June 21st is the first day of summer. So get your stuff. We got hats, t-shirts, beach towels, iPhone covers, you name it. I want to see people rocking the Status Coup swag. So go to the homepage, click on store. We got stuff for men, for women, whatever you want. We got our Fossil Fuckers shirt, our United Corporations of America shirt. All good stuff. And what, Colin, correct? I don't know how to say it. Our clothes are like sustainable and all that environmental jazz.
If you go to statuscoup.com/store, everything on there, is sustainably done. And each time we sell a shirt, they like plant a tree or something like that. There's a cool little graph I'll have to look at again of like your sort of environmental impact based on what shirts we've sold and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's the reason they're a little bit more money.
So our contribution to the dying planet. All right, that's all I got for now. Please, 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 please. The link to the Substack story is in the description. Please read it. Please share it. Sign up for our Substack. If you haven't yet, you could sign up for free. There are paid options too, but you could sign up for free. But share our Substack. Go to Status Coup on Twitter and retweet the tweet if you're on Twitter. Again, we will be back at 5 o'clock Eastern with an interview with Cornel West. Really ranged in a bunch of different areas. We talked about the differences between Bernie and Cornel. We talked about how's he going to run, because obviously he's running for the Green Party nomination, which he wouldn't get if he wins it. He's not going to get it till next year. So then what do you do in the meantime? Because you don't want to just be twiddling your thumbs waiting, hopefully, to win the Green Party nomination. You want to be building a campaign and all that jazz. We talked about, foreign issues. Did ask him a question about MPP, which, interestingly enough, the day that Chris Hedges came out disclosing that he was trying to set up a meeting with he was trying to set up a meeting with Cornel West and the Green Party. That same day, MPP filed with the Federal Election Commission Cornel West as an MPP candidate. So I asked Cornel West about that because I found that to be interesting timing. That same day that Chris Hedges says, yeah, I'm going to try to get him to go Green Party. Movement for a People's Party, its founder, Nick Brana, filed with the FEC without Cornel West's signature, by the way. So Cornel West sort of kind of answered that. He did have some thoughts that I think were interesting on RFK. Hint, hint, said he doesn't have a backbone on a particular topic. Commented on Marianne Williamson. So it was pretty extensive. I think we spoke for like 45 minutes. So that's coming up at 5 o'clock Eastern. And that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you back at 5 o'clock.